All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to talk to you. And yeah, yesterday just couldn't really get a live stream out. I did try. There were some tech issues. I think I got them resolved. I really hope so. Let me know what you think. 240-363-7190. I never stop saying it. That's what this program is about. That's what this live stream is about. You and me talking to each other, listening to each other, hoping to perhaps come to some solutions to the thorniest problems we face. And they are thorny, they are difficult, they are challenging. We'll talk about some of them today. I do want to start out, it is the free for all, of course. I do want to start out by just kind of remembering a little bit, not my favorite senator. I don't want to sit here and, extol her. I'm not one of those people who believes you can never speak ill of the dead, but Di-Fi just passed away, I believe, in the early hours in California. Maybe it was yesterday. There were confirmations. This is from the New York Times, the oldest sitting senator and certainly a fixture of California politics. No question about that fixture part since the 1970s, and of course coming to prominence after the assassination of, I believe it was Harvey Milk and also Mayor Moscone, right? Moscone. So she took over 240-363-7190 as the most prominent San Francisco politician and ultimately became a very, very long-sitting U.S. Senator. I guess Robert Byrd of West Virginia was in Congress and in the Senate longer than she was, but very few had her level of life, of life in the U.S. Senate. So I did want to focus on something. A lot of times on this program, I'm extreme. This, of course, I'm extremely critical, right, of politicians. Maybe worse. Maybe I treat Democrats even worse than Republicans. That may be true. I guess I have some expectations of the Democrats, none whatsoever of Republicans. And that may explain why I'm more harshly critical of the Democrats, even because I don't criticize a slug for being a slug. It is a slug. I do expect slightly more. And I've been consistently disappointed, so I guess I'm stupid. I guess it's just why. Why am I expecting anything? But let's talk about Feinstein for a little bit. I want to focus on two areas where I think she did distinguish herself, where I think she separated herself to a degree from her colleagues. And so let's start, because I want to be positive to the extent I can. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about her neoliberalism or her military her support for, bottomless Pentagon budgets. Let's talk about two areas where she really, I believe, deserved some, real positive commentary, right? I mean, where she did something that really was, I think, good. So let's see, here we go. And I'm going to have, because I'm doing a few things a little differently today. But the two areas where I think, and I'll get to the slide deck in a second with the imagery, but the two areas where she really did a nice job, in my opinion, where she really stood out are on gun control, gun safety, gun control, and also the investigation into the CIA torture program. And I'm not going to say, it was so, she was perfect, but I mean, she definitely stood there and she told she told us, she let us know just how bad, just how wrong, just how misguided, just how evil the bad actors were in the Pentagon. And she deserves, in my opinion, a tremendous amount of credit for that. It was heroic. It really was. So, I'm not going to pretend that her record is only, like some hosts out there, they can't say one good thing about any mainstream or corporate leaning Democrat or Republican, and I get it. I have trouble saying those nice things too. I really, really do. But Senator Feinstein had her moments, and I don't think we should, just as we shouldn't forget where she let us down, I don't think it's right to pretend that she never did anything for the American public. So let's get to that first, and we'll start with and this is really, really important stuff. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. I think America was in some ways, and I know crime rates were higher in the 90s, much higher, and they were used to justify the crime bill, which only made things worse in many, many ways. But Senator Feinstein, working across the aisle at a time when I guess it was more possible, we didn't have Citizens United, we weren't quite as consistently partisan divided, she was able, with the Republicans, to get that federal assault weapons ban passed. And this made our country a safer place. So I do want to give her the credit for that. I don't think we should, when she's just died, I think we should recall this positive contribution from Senator Feinstein. If you want to weigh in on discussing Feinstein, 240-363-7190, love to talk to you about that. 240-363-7190. And this is something that, there are people alive today, a goodly number, who were not killed in massacres, in gun massacres that we've seen of late, month after month, year after year, because of what Feinstein did there. So I want to give her credit for that. And I also do want to play the video here where she spoke on the floor, on the well of the Congress, of the Senate, of the U.S. Senate. And again, I don't want to say this, that she was absolutely perfect. I can't say that. But she did tell us, she let us know in uncertain terms just how bad the CIA had been. And I just think this needs to be replayed. It needs to be recalled, because it meant something. It gave us crucial information about our country and about our military and about the CIA. And it couldn't have been that easy for Feinstein, because she had always been a true supporter, right? I mean, she'd always been on the side of the military and big military budgets, and extolled the investigation arm of the government. And she wasn't, as I would say, in my view, she wasn't as willing as she should have been to simply call out the crimes, the war crimes committed by the CIA. But she did an awful lot. So let's listen to this, perhaps Dianne Feinstein's finest hour.
This has been a long process. The work began 7 years ago when Senator Rockefeller directed committee staff to review the CIA cables describing the interrogation sessions of Abu Zubaydah and al-Nashiri. It's been very difficult, but I believe the documentation and the findings and conclusions will make clear how this program was morally, legally, and administratively misguided, and that this nation should never again engage in these tactics. Let me now turn to the contents of the study. As
All
I
right, now I'm going to play that. I'm not stopping it completely, but I didn't like the term misguided. I just want to be, totally transparent. I know some folks will disagree with my giving Feinstein props and plaudits. I do absolutely think she deserves it. She just died. I've criticized her many times in the past. I want to remember her when she was, I believe, championing justice. I don't like the term misguided. It was malignant. It was malevolent. It was criminal. It wasn't misguided. The people who were behind the torture program were sadists. They weren't trying to keep America safe. They were trying to hurt other people. But Dianne Feinstein, perhaps, or for sure, understating the evil, nevertheless, more than any other U.S. senator, exposed it.
noted, we have 20 findings and conclusions, which fall into 4 general categories. First, the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques were not an effective way to gather intelligence information. Second, the CIA provided extensive amounts of inaccurate information about the operation of the program and its effectiveness to the White House, the Department of Justice, Congress, the CIA Inspector General, the media, and the American public. Third, the CIA's management of the program was inadequate and deeply flawed. And fourth, the CIA program was far more brutal than people were led to believe.
All right, so there she sums it up. I'm not going to play more from that, but it's really, and she spoke for an hour, so we could have played the whole hour. I just didn't, think that was necessary. You can play it for yourself if you want. It's right there on YouTube. But the 4 points are really important. And she led with, this was not effective. And although I don't love that was the first point she made, I understand why she went there. Because when she's describing the brutality, the cruelty of the torture, there are going to be many who will say, well, it's too bad, but we needed to do it. I mean, had been attacked. We were, these were the people behind 9/11. Many of them weren't, by the way. Many of them were innocent, or certainly innocent of what they were charged. And many were never prosecuted, and I think some still even languish in Gitmo. I may be wrong about that. So Feinstein is taking away that one argument that would maybe persuade some people that this was okay. We needed to do it. It was effective. We saved American lives. And she's saying, nope, nothing like that. Nope, you didn't do that. You just tortured people for no reason, to no end. And I give her major props for doing that. She acknowledged herself it was hard to do. So that's the Dianne Feinstein I want to think about when I'm, going over her record and getting my, angry and my teeth are gnashing and I'm irritated. And it doesn't absolve her, right, of the bloated Pentagon budgets that she voted for, supporting the war on Iraq. This doesn't absolve her, but it complicates the picture. It demonstrates that she was a complex figure. Not all good, not all bad, but like all of us, and I hope we can have this kind of grace to see it, like all of us, a mixture of good and bad. And that's why, I do what I do, because and that's why my philosophy always is whatever you want to call it, my mission. Everyone has enough and no one has too much. We all have good and bad in us. We all deserve a decent, secure life. And none of us deserve tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. To Dianne Feinstein's credit, She exposed evil by people in power. She did not do enough to reduce the power and influence of those people. In fact, to a great degree, she enhanced their wealth and power. All right, that's going to do it on this story. If you want to join me, love to talk to you. 240-363-7190. 240-363-7190. I was surprised. If you caught my very brief stream yesterday, which I took down because it just wasn't, I wasn't pleased with it. The quality was terrible. And I'm not even sure how good today is. I think the look, the video, it's not as clear and crisp as I want it to be. We'll get there next time. My computer just locked me out, and I'm so irritated with Windows. No one wants to hear people complain about, but the Windows, I had to even call tech support, and they weren't particularly helpful. I mean, they tried, but it wasn't a good, I had to just finally reinstall everything, and that took up hours. I think in the end, I'll have better quality, and it'll make it easier for me, but it was not a good day. So this story in the New York Times really, really surprised me. Virtually no change in the frontier between Ukraine and Russia in terms of the lands that are now currently occupied by the two warring armies. And you can see the pink in that map or chart I'm showing you. I guess it's a plan, really, or map, held by Russia. So a significant chunk of Ukraine remains in Russian hands. And if you look at the frontier there, the line, you can see there's been virtually no change in this year. Virtually no. If there's been any change, there's been a slight increase in the red, or the area held by Russia, than in the blue, which was the gains by Ukraine this year. Despite the billions of dollars in munitions that we have shipped over there, despite all the speeches, despite all the saber rattling, there's been virtually no movement. And I was really surprised when I saw this. I have to be honest with you. We've heard a lot over the summer. I've certainly read a lot that the Ukrainian counteroffensive may not have been going great. It may not have been doing as well as people had hoped, but it was doing okay. They were making gains. They were getting back some of the lost territory. That's what I had been reading. That's what I've been hearing. That's frankly what I thought was happening. So I was quite shocked, really, to see there's been no net gain in land, in territory recaptured by Ukraine. None. In fact, if anything, there's been a net loss this year. I thought, well, when I saw this plan, I thought, well, maybe a lot of the, maybe there was a point where Russia had actually gained a significant amount of territory by, say, April or May, just before the Ukrainian counteroffensive, because I had been under the impression that the Ukrainian counteroffensive, not great, but again, making some strides, right? I thought Mariupol, maybe they had retaken. There was a city they had retaken. You can't see it on this plan. I don't know if it was Mariupol, but there was a city they were also pincer movements towards, and you can kind of see it in the south east portion where there's more blue and red. There had been some movement down towards Crimea. I thought, well, they must have gained some territory, but in fact, it's not true. This entire year has just been a stalemate. And you get that by looking at this plan. Let me see if I can get it for you. Right here, this little chart where you can see, and it's important. Let's see if I can get the whole thing for you. I'm going to put this on, but then I'm going to try to get the whole thing. So this is since Feb 2022. Okay, this is since Feb 2022. And what you're seeing is in the first couple of months of the war, the Russians made a lot of gains, right? It makes sense. They attacked. They took a whole bunch of land away from Ukraine. Then there was a response, and the Ukrainians gained some of it back. And you can see in that how the lines, the horizontal lines, are square miles, and you have 10,000 square miles. They're actually in ten thousands of square miles. So in that first couple of months, 3 months, you're seeing 20,000 plus square miles occupied by Russia. And then you're seeing over 10,000 recaptured. Since the end of 2022, since Jan 2023, and you can see it in the bottom center, bottom right, amount of territory, where the point down is amount of territory Ukraine gained. Nothing. There's been no movement whatsoever. After you see Russia withdrew from Kherson, virtually no movement in either direction. So this vaunted counteroffensive has done nothing except kill people, except destroy cities, except take civilian lives. It's been an absolute, complete disaster. It's gone nowhere. It's time for us to do everything in our power to join with China, to join with India, and push for an end to these hostilities. This idea that we have presented by Blinken, among others, at the beginning of the summer, that there's no negotiations until Russia withdraws, is absurd. Killing, death, bombing has done nothing to push Russia back. It is long past time to withdraw. And those who won't talk about this, they don't deserve your votes. The progressives who refuse to say this is a terrible mistake, they don't deserve your votes. Joe Biden should not get reelected because he is continuing this awful war. Again, I was really surprised. I actually thought, well, maybe, before I saw this article, I thought, well, maybe there has been some real successes. And why would I have thought that? Let's look at the reporting. What you've seen, what I've seen in our newspapers. New York Times, August 12th, just 1 month ago, a month and a half ago. Reporting from Kyiv, Mark Santora. Ukraine makes tactically significant progress in its counteroffensive. Troops advance several miles along two main lines of attack in Kyiv's drive to reach the southern coast, right, towards Crimea, and several Russian supply lines, while explosions echoed at the vital Kerch Strait Bridge. We talked about this. I had a really good guest on to discuss this. But if you look again at that plan, nothing. No change in the actual frontier. No gains by either army in August, despite what the New York Times told you. So again, I was quite surprised. Were you surprised? Did you expect, either at the beginning of the summer, I know some of you did because I heard from you on social media, Hal, don't be such a gloomy Gus. It's going to turn around. Russia's going to withdraw. Russia's going to retreat. This whole stuff with Wagner's a problem for Russia. I heard that. I heard it. And it turns out that it wasn't true. It just didn't happen that way. Here's David Ignatius, who I have recently quoted with, positively, because he's correctly said that Joe Biden shouldn't run for re-election, even though Ignatius has been a cheerleader for this proxy war that Biden has been promoting along with the entire Democratic Party. Not one Democrat voting. I think every Democrat has voted to fund this war. So why shouldn't the West? This is July 18th. This is why I thought the war was going well. They're lying. They lied to us over and over and over. Or at least the war was going relatively well for Ukraine. It wasn't as bad. It wasn't a complete stalemate. It wasn't World War I. It wasn't trench warfare. So Ignatius 2 months ago tells us the West feels gloomy about Ukraine. It shouldn't. Ukraine might not be winning this war yet, but Russia is losing, and its leaders and people know it. I read the article. I don't play all of it. I didn't read. I'm not going to show you all of it, but I never saw anything about why Russia was losing. I didn't understand. I totally didn't get that from this. I mean, it's a stalemate, and a stalemate favors, in the end, Russia because it's so much bigger. They have so many more people, and they are also fighting in Ukraine, not in Russia. So Ukraine is being destroyed, not Russia. Ignatius's article there just was senseless, made nothing, meaningless. But he made one specific point that I want to just examine briefly here, where he says that we can be optimistic here because there's a pro-Ukraine commitment by the alliance that continues to deepen. He's saying, Russia has more people. Russia's bigger. Russia's got many more weapons than Ukraine, of course. But NATO's enormous. NATO is so wealthy. And the NATO alliance is so committed now. We're all in it together, according to Ignatius. And we don't have to, so even if there's some less than positive news from the front, it's okay because in the end, our alliance is going to carry the day. That was what Ignatius told us back in July. Just a pro-Ukraine commitment by this alliance is deepening. It's even deeper than we thought. So how's that alliance going? Is that right? Again, the news is just belies what these columnists, what these newspapers are telling us. It just doesn't come close to what they're saying. So where is this vaunted alliance now? Poland isn't supplying weapons to Ukraine because of a grain row. Poland borders a huge line, right? Ukraine is kind of nestled between Russia and Poland. Ukraine's a very big country. Not as big as Russia, but for European standards, it's a big country. Well, their former ally to the west, to the northwest, is not going to give them weapons anymore. That's a big problem. Of course, you might say, well, Poland's not that big a deal. They're not that important to this alliance. So, pish tosh, they're not supporting Ukraine. It's not just Poland. What about Germany? Remember, Germany, if any country should hate Russia, it's Germany, right? Historically, they're enemies. And remember, we were told early this year, Russia blew up that Nord Stream pipeline. Now, it turns out that was, no one's arguing that anymore. But we heard that. And it made no sense. Why would Russia blow up its own pipeline just to hurt Germany? It made no sense. And Seymour Hersh from the New York Times said it was the U.S. government that did it, the military here. Others say it was Ukraine. Maybe it was Ukrainians trained by our military. I think that sounds plausible as well. But those Germans who supposedly hate Russia so much, and the history, from World War II, and where actually the Russians should hate Germany more than the Germans hate Russia. But the response by Russia was brutal, and understandably so, the way they were slaughtered in the initial attack in 1941 by the Germans. The Russians retaliated in kind. So there's certainly no love lost between these two countries. German state-owned company resumes trading in Russian LNG, liquefied natural gas. So again, what you're seeing here is the that unified NATO alliance isn't really so unified, despite the pressure by NATO to not trade with Russia. Their state gas company, a week ago, Bloomberg reported, is going to again start importing Russian LNG. So this alliance is fractured. It's not seeing any military advance. The only thing we're seeing are deaths. And it's not even, and look, any death is awful. I'm not going to say it's okay for soldiers to die. It certainly isn't. But when you join the military, you know that can happen to you. And you are, in fact, also killing people. So I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm not saying we should ever, diminish or dismiss military deaths and casualties. But what about child casualties? I mean, this is an absolute, it's just so awful. It's as sad and as horrible as anything can be. Just these young children are being killed because of bombs, because of mines, explosions, collateral damage. This is all happening because we're putting, I know everyone's going to say, oh no, it's just Putin. It's just Putin. It's all on Putin. It's all on Putin. It's not all on Putin. We have flat out said no ceasefire, no conversation, no discussion. And that's why this has happened. It doesn't have to happen. It shouldn't happen. All right, 240-363-7190 if you want to join me. 24. And I don't like to be that guy who all I do is fret and rub my hands together and shed tears without a solution. The solution is we've got to abandon the Democratic Party. They've demonstrated they're not a party of peace. They're not on our side. Heck, they're not even on the side of workers. People say, well, maybe a state party is a little bit better. And sometimes they are. But this is yet another story that demonstrates that there just is not. And I know you want to believe that there's some kind of moral superiority. There's some sort of, you're better if you're a Democrat. You get things. You get the climate crisis. You get that Black Lives Matter, right? That's what you want to believe if you're a Democrat. I don't know how anyone who's a Democrat, and you live in a city like New York, with so much, was 80%. This is the most unequal county in the country. And there's in a nation that is as unequal as any. In a nation where the inequality is at Gilded Age level. New York City is the most unequal. Manhattan, specifically, is the most unequal place in the whole country. So if you believe that there's something progressive, there's something liberal about the Democratic Party, which is in complete control of that city and of the state too, largely. I mean, the Republicans have in the past held power in the state house in Albany, but now they don't. It's, I believe, veto-proof majority in the New York Assembly and a Democrat governor, Kathy Hochul. So if you think these people are so great, then why aren't they doing something about this absolute evil of poverty, inequality, desperation, housing prices that require you to be making $150,000 a year just to survive? I think we've got Elizabeth on the line. Are you there, Elizabeth? I think I've got you. Good. Hello.
Yeah.
How are you?
Hi, Hal.
Great to talk to you.
Hello from the most unequal place.
Yes, it
Manhattan.
is. Yes, it is. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm thriving like a wild bohemian that knows how to live on the poverty level very well, thanks to socialist programs like libraries.
Yeah, no, libraries are nice, but they're not great for sleeping in. And a lot of people do sleep in them.
Yes, no, and a lot of people sleep under the construction zones that protect the sidewalk from falling concrete because they have a roof over their head they can afford. I am one of the lucky artists that pays very little for where I live.
Well, I'm glad to hear you've got a place to live because, as you say, a lot of people don't. And everywhere. It's not just, DC, San Francisco. I always loved San Francisco, but it's just you walk down the street and it's like living in it's like being in a tent city. And I don't blame the people, but I would think even if you're a rock-ribbed Republican, you would say, gee, I'd like to be able to walk, down my city streets without stumbling over people. We have to provide housing for them. And nobody seems to give a rat's fat ass about it. Elizabeth?
No, a lot of people think that poor people deserve to be poor. They've made bad decisions, or they didn't compete well enough, or that's just the way the dice were rolled and they're the lucky ones. And also, you have people, like you said, in Manhattan making $150,000 a year and barely surviving because that's what it is to make a living. So they can't look at other people and make a sacrifice, or at least that's their psychology.
I don't think that's wrong. I think that's fair, Elizabeth, but they can demand, and they should be demanding, that the billionaires, the Wall Street financiers make that sacrifice, taxes. And they won't do it. It seems like they can't.
Yeah.
Who did they elect? They elected, this police guy, this police officer who's clearly on the side of the billionaire class, Eric Adams.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just getting involved in New York politics, and I tuned into your show right when you were discussing war, which is another thing we're not taking responsibility for, and I'm really happy you brought that up. Okay, Putin, probably not the nicest guy in the world. We're not either, and I really wish that we would take responsibility because we sold cluster bombs from some discount warehouse in the Pentagon. Lenny's discount cluster bombs got shipped out to Ukraine, and children, elderly, innocent people will die. Maybe not now, maybe 10 years in the future when a cluster bomb decides to go off. And it's upsetting that we're not taking responsibility. I don't want any war, and I get laughed at, and I just don't understand how we have evolved and continue to evolve violence with us. I don't really think that it is a high intellectual pursuit.
You know what I find so frustrating too.
World, quite frankly, the world needs a timeout, Hal.
Well, I'd love to give it to him, but
they're not Nazis on every side. We got Nazis. Didn't Reagan have like a host of Nazis helping? There are Nazis over in Canada that are being applauded.
Yeah, some old
Zelensky's
Nazi.
got some Nazis.
Yep.
What is it with Nazis in war, Hal? They're really good at killing people, and they're really good. They have very high self-esteem. They should live. Everybody else up on the table for killing.
You know, Barack Obama said he was good at killing people. Who knew? That was one of his famous quotes. Who knew? It turns out I'm good at it. I don't have any answers. I wish I did. The only thing I can say,
as a martial artist that studies a peaceful art, it's debatable whether or not Barry was good at killing people, because there is such a good thing as a good death. You learn that on the mat when you train with someone who can kill you, and they will show you that you can go out very quickly if your head is twisted off this way, or you can be mangled in a corner and die for hours if your body's twisted another way. And it's very important to prepare yourself for a good death. And
it's a little gruesome, aren't you? You're being a little gruesome.
It's a little real. Well, I'm not as gruesome as war. Not as gruesome as war.
No.
But, these are things that the samurai looked at. The samurai would just laugh at this entire war. I mean, the samurai were like, oh, you want to kill someone? Well, why don't you do it with a sword and make it personal? They laughed at the invention of the gun because they thought the invention of the gun was a sign of weakness, because you can stand from a coward's distance and kill very impersonally, and you're not taking responsibility for that kill. Whereas a samurai with his sword, which is an extension of spirit in Japanese culture, slays their enemy and it has a personal investment, takes responsibility for that death and that release of that spirit. So, where are we going with this war thing? It doesn't seem very evolved. It seems like it's something we're clinging to from like a very primitive.
It's profitable. It's profitable, and we're trying to cut the Russians out of the liquefied natural gas market. Our LNG ports are booming right now because Russian supplying is way down. Although now we see Germany is starting to import again. It's also exacerbating, the biggest threat. The current Holocaust, the new Holocaust, which is the global burning. It's hard to be upbeat. It's really hard to be upbeat. Elizabeth, Elizabeth's Radical Agenda, of course, Elizabeth joining us again. And I did give a little tribute. I know you're big on the ERA. I think so was Senator Di-Fi. Not my favorite senator by any means, but she did have her good moment. So I don't know if you caught that. That's how I started the program, a little tribute.
No, I missed your tribute to Senator Feinstein. The late great Robert William Abrevaya, who would close every potluck at the Comedy Store in Hollywood for something like 40 years. I have to confirm that with Don Barris. But Robert always thought that he was supposed to be the host of The Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson stole his gig. He would do a half-hour closing on weed, a closing set on weed, and he would always say, smoke the Einstein with Feinstein. And so finally they're together chiefing. I would like to think she's having more than just a drink in the afterlife, wherever she may be. She blazed wicked trails for women. Women's agenda in general is more centered around celebrating life than death, with very few exceptions. Of course, our House and Senate have hands in war, but I pray the more that women become involved in power, the more we find ways to channel our greed, since that seems to be something no one wants to get rid of, and find greed in proactive things. Like, I wish people would get greedy over, planting trees and making oxygen. Find a way to make a lot of oxygen.
Well, I think that's
resolve some issues.
That's a really good point, because we are greedy. I mean, that's part of human nature, right? So we have to.
I'm not, but then I mean, maybe I am. I don't know. I can't do math.
I mean, some people are greedier than others.
Categories of math.
Some are greedier than others.
Not enough. I got not enough. I got enough, and I got plenty, and that's where my basic math ends. So I don't feel like I'm greedy. I want to see everyone in homes.
I think we need to channel it, right? I mean, I agree with you. There's obviously, we're all different. Some of us are much greedier, more selfish, and self-aggrandizing than others. But it's an innate human trait to try to accumulate wealth for yourself for a variety of reasons.
Aren't human, but I don't want to go David Icke.
But I guess what I'm saying is that given that this is who we are, let's try to channel that trait into productive, positive, socially beneficial ways. And sometimes it does. Like, if you're an artist, and you produce.
Why couldn't have Dick Cheney been greedy over how many Grateful Dead shows he had?
Yes.
Instead of illegal wars.
Yes. All right, listen, Elizabeth, I got to run. Actually, I really appreciate the call.
I slipped to the silly and.
But do you have something
I just want to say, sir, that I love your show.
Oh, thank you.
I tuned in to hear what you were saying, and I'm very grateful for your stance on war.
Well, I appreciate that, Liz. I love hearing from you. I was so happy to get you and your gal pals on, the comedians, a couple of weeks ago, and then before that, it was so much fun.
Pal.
And you were hilarious, and so was Felicia and Rhonda. And the whole crew. I wish I could remember their names, but
Eric Marino, Carol Montgomery. Oh my God!
Well, you're going to do it again, right? You're going to do it again, so we'll get you back on. I got to let you go. I'm going to turn you.
All right,
I'm going to drop you like a hot rock. We'll see you soon. Have a great weekend.
Dr. Strangelove forever.
Hey, take care. There she goes, Elizabeth Croydon, and she's great to have on the program. So I had another story. I was going to talk a little bit about what's going on at Boston University with Professor Ibram X. Kendi. Sagar from Breaking Points is scathing, and I thought he made some good points. You're going to have to wait till Monday. We'll talk about that with Arlen when he comes back and joins me this Monday. And I was watching myself, and I think the audio's great, but there's not that super crisp, clear video. So we'll fix that. And I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks.